and to our workshops on the Bach cello suites. Today the Sarabande from the second suite, and in about 15 minutes Camille Berto, jazz singer, will be my guest. The Sarabande from the second suite is has been, I would say, the most emblematic movement maybe of all the 6 suites, to represent, to embody dramatic moments of fate, like for example Rostropovitch playing at the Berlin Wall after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Also Rostropovitch, when he played in this very dramatic concert at the Proms, he played the Dvorak concerto just after the Russian army had invaded Czechoslovakia, and people were almost rioting against the presence of a Russian orchestra that night in London after these events, and of Rostropovitch because they were Russian. And everybody who was present at this concert says that the intensity with which Rostropovitch played responded to this, and the encore particularly. They mentioned this encore that he played after the Dvorak concerto, the Sarabande from the second suite, was so gripping. Casals would play it very often, also in his role as messenger of peace. And the recording of Casals, of this piece, of this very Sarabande, was the inspiration for Ingmar Bergman in his film Through the Glass Darkly, which is a very dark drama talking about craziness in the medical sense, and a father struggling with his daughter having this disease. As you know, I've had this project with Anne-Theresa de Kersmaker, where we have been going around the world with the 6 suites. In the Sarabande of the second suite, Anne-Theresa refers in turn to this movie by Ingmar Bergman, and the dancer for this suite she asked him to do this run back to the back of the stage in a very dramatic way, out of breath, and come back as it appears in the film by Bergman. I couldn't help, and I hope you will forgive me for this, to also, when I was preparing this and plunging into this Sarabande and also looking at why it is such a telling movement, I couldn't help but myself also think again and again of the events of the past weeks, of the very dramatic events of the past weeks, and particularly of a young 18-year-old cellist, Mohamed Sissé, who was unfortunately shot and killed on the 31st of May as the demonstrations for racial justice were going on in Philadelphia. And I want to dedicate this episode to him, and this is also why I decided to dress in black today. And so in general, I want to say that it's difficult at the moment to just make music and not acknowledge this very, very powerful movement which is happening in America and over the world. And thank you to all of those who are, you know, taking risks to defend these values. And last but not least, I want to say there is an account to help the family of Mohammed, who disappeared on the 31st of May. And you can find the link on my Facebook, on my personal Facebook. Tonight I will repost it on also on my page, Facebook page, and on my website. So if you want to help, any kind of contribution, no matter how small, will be welcome. Now let's go back to our Sarabande. I will play the first half of it, and I will then try to look into why this Sarabande is so telling. So this Sarabande, if we compare it with the other very faithful Sarabande, which is the Sarabande of the Fifth Suite, the Sarabande of the Fifth Suite is sort of working on almost going to immateriality. There are almost no notes. One can barely recognize the harmonies. We are almost somewhere where there is no oxygen, and this brings some kind of transcendence. Here, the construction and the motivic way in which Bach works makes it a much more grounded language, a piece much more a storytelling. And if you remember, just to show you the difference, the Sarabande of the First Suite was very much, almost bar by bar, working on this Sarabande feeling of 1 and 2. I'm sorry for jumping back and forth, but I will briefly... One. Yeah, so 1, 2, 1, 2. Here, immediately, Bach does this in the first bar. We have very much this fall to the second beat, but then on the second bar we stand and we stay on hanging there on the second beat, and therefore he gives immediately a sense of 2-bar structures. Nothing on the second beat. And then again 2-bar, 1. And again the falling steps. This fateful, you recognize these notes falling step by step. Make it a sort of, like if someone was carrying something fateful and meaningful, in something that is not so light to carry. And then we go on again our second beat. This time we rise. So there is some hope, and we go to F major. And now in this F major that we have reached, we celebrate the last 4 bars, which are built differently on a motive, and this is where I wanted to come, which is exposed for the first time now, but will play a very important role in the second half, which is 8th note to 16th note. Again. And then cadence. And that way, did, after doing 2 bars, 2 bars, 2 bars, 2 bars, 4 bars at once. In the second half, we start with an episode in G minor. Very expressive. And now this passage, I would say it is what could bring this second suite much closer to the fifth suite. Just scarce, naked eighth notes, without anything else, without chords, without any other value, and just modulations going down. Motif, croche, deux double croche, I say it in French because it's easier, took over and came back to and then we fall again. Now, you remember this passage in the first half where with this motif, 8th note, 2/16th note, was rising and celebrating F major. Well, we take the same motive and the same rhythm exactly, but in a very different key and with a very different consequence. We do go gradually up in the register, but the bass goes down and as far down as possible to make it so we stretch and bring much more expressivity through this very large interval between sopran and the bass. And actually the piece is finished. But for those who know the piece, it is not finished. And this is actually, I hope not to say anything wrong, the only movement in all 6 suites where Bach does so openly and so obviously a double ending or an insisting to add some drama, that we had really a clear final cadence. And then we have a postscriptum. Which adds even more, I would say, humanity and depth to this Sarabande, who already is so deep. I have to talk and explain something about this passage, because I think some cellists amongst you might very well have been shaken by what they heard here. In these 2 bars. Because what I play here is exactly the notes that stand in Anna Magdalena's manuscript. Wenzinger, who did the first Urtext edition in the 60s, so we are talking about 60 years ago, he did a very good job and it was a very good base to work on, but he thought this is too shocking. this combination of notes is just simply too modern and too dissonant and too shocking. It cannot be right. Magdalena has made a mistake. Well, there's two things I want to say about this. I am absolutely 100% convinced that these are the right notes for two reasons. The first reason is that she would have made the mistakes 2 bars in a row exactly on the same note, which doesn't really make sense. There are a few passages in the 6 suites. We know that sometimes there is a half bar missing and everything, because, you know, when you think about the conditions in which they were working back then. But here we have it's not at all, it's very clean, this passage in the manuscript, and she writes exactly these notes. I will play for you now the conventional version, which is actually played much more often, even today, which is this. Which is, of course, much less shocking. Now, let me go to the piano for a moment to explain why the actual text is shocking, but why I think it is absolutely right. So, not only because Anna Magdalena, again, wrote exactly, intentionally, the same thing in the two bars after each other, but so what is shocking us is that, so that was the corrected version as we have it in our ears, and when we do this, so this movement between the sopran and the bass is really, actually, extremely shocking, and she repeats it. So, you remember that we said that because Bach composed for a monodic instrument, he decided to use this for expressive means. This is exactly what's happening here. What Bach does very often is that he would do this ascending and then going down. He would do it in other pieces a lot of time if this upper voice goes down. That's much less shocking, right? And then that would be much less shocking. So I think that, I am sure that there is implied in this chord note, this A and then this B natural, implied in the chord, but because it's written for cello, we get only 2 notes. Now, one could say 2 things. One could say, oh, bad luck, but then it's really bad taste because we miss this note. Well, or maybe we imagine, and this is my interpretation, that Bach again saw this movement as a quite dramatic one, and we looked at, at the chords, at the harmonies, and this sort of very fateful atmosphere in it. And if he had the possibility to add, to the gripping quality of this ending, again, remember we have seen that in other movements. When he wants to get dramatic, he makes chromatic. This is exactly what the bass is doing. The ascension more dramatic at the end of the piece. But he adds to it a sort of chromatic quality and a very shocking combination of notes. So the soprano does its own chromatic in a way. Which I think adds a gripping very, very strong quality to this passage. I hope I managed to convince some of you to at least try this version, and because I think it is so rich and so powerful. Enough talking. This is wonderful. This is 20 minutes after 7, and this is the moment where we can welcome our guest, Camille Berto. Dear Camille, are you with us?
I'm here.
Camille. Yes, hello Camille. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank
you very much.
So much for taking the time to be with us. And also, I had such an incredible fun, but not only, it was so inspiring for me to do a little clip with you of just like, I don't know, I think it's 40 seconds or something. We did a little invention of Bach last week together, or with a cappella, and we posted it on social media. And it was so refreshing for me to see how you just, by your, because you are so inhabited by the joy of being together with Bach, that it was very contagious and very inspiring for me. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask you, Camille, you have a very, very interesting how is it called, like vita, curriculum, because you actually in your studies you were I was going to say with a bit of irony, a good old classical musician. You were formed as a pianist, so can you tell us more about it and how you came to do what you do now, and what do you think, what are the consequences of what it brings you to have this background of classical musician in your life today?
Yes, I can say that I'm coming from both world, jazz, improvisation, and it's a pity to make a separation between the two worlds, because it's not very true, because classical music was at the beginning improvisation. Chopin used to improvise a lot, Bach as well. So, bon, it's a pity, but it's like that. I studied classical music, piano, during 20 years at the conservatory, and at the same time, my dad, who is a good amateur jazz pianist, taught me a little of jazz, but I was more singing with him. He was on the piano and I was singing. So I had these two worlds from the beginning. But at 20 years old, I felt a little trapped into the conservatory stuff. I had the sensation that it was forbidden to make some mistakes, and I think it was not really my philosophy, because I think we need to make some mistakes to find our world. Exactly. It's because of the mistake that we can find new horizons. We are not supposed to be to go. I think the baby, when he is growing up, he needs to fall down to understand how to be to stand up. So finally, I discovered that improvisation was really important for me, and that's why I came back to the jazz music, and I worked. Now I'm a jazz singer, and I feel more comfortable in this music. But of course, I'm very, very close to Jean-Sébastien Bach. To all I studied all these composers, and
Chopin, I'm sure.
Yeah, Debussy, Ravel.
Yeah. That's amazing. What you just said is such. I would like to catch on what you said about the relationship to perfection, because I had this very strong experience with our common friend Raphaël Imbert. I know you know him as well. He's a wonderful musician, and he will be a guest also for a future episode. And we recorded something, for my last album, Complice, and so the rest of the album is classical pieces, repertoire, and I had, as always, in the studio, played again and again to reach exactly, perfection and everything. And since anyway, improvisation was involved in what we were recording, Raphael and I, in that piece, there was no way one could edit, actually, so that means it had to be, so we just did like 2-3 takes, and then we just chose the one we liked, and that was it. And that was, for me, I had to let go and to accept it's not going to be perfect, and it's not about it. But not only this, but as we were listening to the 3 takes, there was one take where I had to make an octave jump from one note to the other, and in that particular version, one could hear a lot of noise, of my fingers going like... And Raphael turned to me and he said, "This is fantastic. We need this one. This is the one." Because he was much more interested in that noise than in the actual things I was playing before and after. That was...
Because the intention was there, I think.
Yeah. And the life. And that was sort of initiating experience for me as a classical musician, because as much as I each time remind myself take risks, but that's true, you are right, that we have a little bit as classical musicians, this struggle with because everybody, there are already some recordings that are so perfect, so I have to make it perfect as well. About Bach more specifically, I would love to ask you, so you have done so many great things about Bach. I think one of the one with which I discovered you, I don't know if it's the most popular one, but it has like, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of likes. It's this little video you did with on the Glenn Gould first variation, first Goldberg variation. And I thought it was so wonderful that how playful you went with Bach, just taking the note and catching some notes and leaving some others, and then catching a middle voice and playing with it like a cat, who's playing with a little pelote, and I thought it was so enjoyable. Did this very uninhibited, this very free sort of relationship with Bach, was it, 2 questions. Was it, first of all, always like this, or was there a point where you just said, oh, what the heck, I'll just enjoy it? And does the other side of Bach, like the one we were actually more talking about today, the Sarabande of the second suite, is it one that is also important to you? Do you listen to cantatas that have a more dramatic, Es ist vollbracht, or these cantatas that talk about, about dramatic events, also are important to you?
I can say that when I started to play Bach, I was quite a little girl. Maybe I was 6-7 years old, and I started from the beginning to sing at the same time. And I discovered that in the Bach music, there was something so clear in the different voices. It was so each voice was very, very clear, and it brings me lots of pleasure just to sing them. And we can say that for lots of kind of things from Bach, but for piano. I used to play partita, invention, clavier bien tempéré, of course, les suites, les suites anglaises et françaises, French suite and English suite. But I always sung his music at the same time. I don't know why. Maybe it was really close to me. There was something in the rhythm very interesting to sing. It was like a game, and at the same time, I'm feeling a meditation when I'm singing Bach music. It seems very very strict and very everything clean, very clean. But in fact, it's really crazy and really close to improvisation. It's hard for me to explain it in English, because I would like to express it in I will express it much better. But yes, finally I have been close to Bach's music in a very instinctive way. It has never been something cerebral for me. I was singing it, and for me it was really fresh, and now as I am singing Bach, I'm never thinking okay, I have to maybe to let it go, or I have to be more strict. It just happened, in fact, because I met some jazz musicians. Jean-Sébastien Bach is very important for many jazz musicians. We can say we have seen some Brad Meldo did a tournée with Bach. Keith Jarrett recorded lots of CD, and I have been working with Dan Tepfer, who worked a lot on Goldberg variations, and I finally one day he was playing it, and I just thought, oh, I'm gonna sing it. It's for me, it would be very natural. And I used to play Bach a lot when I was a teenager, when I was younger, and let's sing it like I was doing when I was a child. And I can speak as well about Bobby McFerrin, who did lots of Bach version, and for me it's a very good example of, okay, I'm going to use my voice just to sing what I like. And it can be a bird singing, it can be Jean-Sébastien Bach, it can be what I want to I want to imitate the sound I like, so I'm going to use my voice to do that. And that's why I did it with Jean-Sébastien Bach, John Coltrane, and lots of
yeah, it's amazing how you manage to also to use your voice like an instrument, basically, like maybe like you would play the piano. So that's really, really very impressive. I wanted, before we finish, to ask you about two things. I saw that you started to do some jazz, to propose some jazz workshops live to people. I think if people are interested, they can go on your Facebook page. I've seen it there for sure, and everywhere. If you want to say something about this, and then I also know that you released a new album, I think this very week. Would you like to tell us something about this album?
Yes, it's my album was supposed to be released 1 month ago, but because of the the pandemia, it will be released the beginning of September. We can say in this album, and at the same time in the workshop I'm doing, and in my work in general, that I am putting together all I crossed in my when I was a child, because like I told you, I used to go at the conservatory to study classical piano, but opera as well, ballet, drama, theater, and I used to play jazz saxophone and jazz vocal, of course. That's what I am doing, and piano jazz as well. So and I love to write as well. So I put together everything I liked, and I'm trying to during my workshop to put all I have learned for the moment when I was learning saxophone, when I was going to my piano class, when I studied scat, jazz scat. So I think my road is not so common, but like everybody's. But I was looking for myself for many years. So now I think I can teach a mix of all of that stuff, and maybe it can be interesting. It can be new finally.
Absolutely, Cami. I'm so happy that you said this, that sometimes complicated roads lead to something very, as you say, very unique, very special, very personal, and it's it's good to know that. I also sometimes found the road not that simple in my life, so it's good to know. Thank you so much, Camille, for taking this time.
Thank you.
It was so interesting to hear you and to see you. And everybody, next week, Friday, 7 o'clock, I'll see you there. We will talk next week about the menuets, of course, of the second suite. See you, and be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.